So on October 1st, Tuesday of this week, we had a buffer zone ordinance passed in Jackson, Mississippi. Mississippi is one of the 6 states in the U.S. that only has one abortion facility.
It's amazing that there's 6.
I know. You wouldn't think of that.
You think of there being 1 or 2.
Yeah. But we're seeing less and less abortion facilities as they continue to shut down. And this one's getting a lot of a lot of press and attention right now in the pro-life community. What I keep hearing over and over is, well, there was this buffer zone passed, and it's unconstitutional, and this is tragic, and this is horrible, and we're all upset about free speech.
Right.
But not a lot of people are talking about what led up to this decision.
Yeah.
And so I definitely want to get into some of the details today. We're definitely going to be looking at some of the mistakes that were made in Mississippi by the pro-life people that led up to this decision. And I think that sometimes it's really hard to talk about the things that our own side is not doing so well.
Yeah.
But I think it's important to do that because we can learn a lot from what happened and make sure it doesn't happen in our community.
This is like a fascinating case study for what not to do and how, what are like natural kind of consequences, if you will, that will happen. I mean, my dad voice is in my head now. That's not what I mean, but it's somewhat predictable maybe. What could have happened. And it's a really helpful thing to see, like, hey, there are real major consequences to using bad strategy. But at the same time, I know we both have this attitude of we love these pro-lifers.
Right.
There's not an attitude of we're so much smarter than those Mississippi people or something like there's anything all the people involved are so well-meaning. I love these people. I have an affection for these people. I want to help them. I want them to save as many lives as possible. But especially you in the last couple of days, as you've really kind of dove into what is going on in Mississippi, it did become clear that some of these people that we would love to be friends with and we would love to try to help, we think probably made some strategic missteps.
So I do want to be clear that there are different groups out there.
Yeah.
They're not all pro-lifers. Some of them are street preachers. They may not be for abortion, but they're definitely not what we would talk about when we were talking about the pro-life community there.
Right.
And so there are loving, sweet people, well-meaning pro-lifers in this area, and we're not coming on here to roast them today.
Yep.
If this was a roast, it would be a lot more entertaining. I would be making a lot more jokes. This would be a Steven Crowder late night type podcast. That is not what we're doing.
We could do that. We could do that. We could make this funny and all that.
But I'm not coming on here to just roast these people. What we want to talk about is what did some of the people who you're not going to hear about, they're behind the scenes. The press is not covering this in the way that we would, right? They're not interviewing the calm person. The reporter's never going to the calm person. Have you ever watched the local news?
Right.
There's lots of funny videos online about this because they always choose the crazy, eccentric, exciting person to talk to.
Yeah.
And so you're going to see, if you look into this story more, and I have looked an awful lot into this story, there's a lot of what we would call a circus happening on the sidewalk there.
What we would call a circus.
It looks like a circus. It looks like a zoo.
Yeah.
There's a lot of methods being used that we would say do not do this because they're not effective and they cause problems. So we're going to get into that a little bit. But first I want to talk about why are we so afraid of buffer zone laws?
Yeah.
What does that actually mean? What's the difference between a buffer zone law and something like we're going to talk about a noise ordinance in a little bit?
Yeah.
Because buffer zone, everyone talks about it being unconstitutional because it is limiting the free speech activity in a specific area.
Right.
So why should we be so afraid of this coming into our community?
Yeah. So for those pro-lifers who haven't gotten into kind of looking at this, basically a buffer zone law is usually a thing that's passed to try to prevent pro-life, either whether they're protesters, whether they're sidewalk counselors, whether they're prayerful witnesses, whatever they're doing, they don't want those people, especially if they're sidewalk counselors, to be having good interaction with potential, abortion clients. And so what they'll want to say is generally free speech is a good thing. We're all pro First Amendment type people, but there's this kind of exception because of how emotional and controversial and private an abortion specifically is. there's going to be greater limits around a specific abortion clinic to try to kind of balance things and treat this as this very private, very let's just make sure that women don't have to see protesters or hear from sidewalk counselors or whatever.
And whether or not you agree with that Supreme Court decision, I mean, we saw this with Hill versus Colorado in 2000. You can read the dissenting things. You can read the description. I think you can read Scalia and what he was saying, but you have to look at this has happened before in the U.S. It's also happened before in other countries, and we don't want it happening. Whether it's held up or it's not, that's another issue. But we want to prevent this from happening in the first place. Think about all the pro-life resources that we have to throw at fighting something like this in the first place. We don't want that happening.
Right.
We don't want to deal with this, and there are ways to prevent it.
Because one of the best things that a pro-life person can do if you want to save lives is sidewalk counsel, which, if you're going to do it effectively, typically means trying to stand in front of the abortion facility and try to peacefully reach out to the people who are going in. And so it is so devastating to sidewalk counseling activity when a buffer zone happens. And so so I'll give an example. The example that's always in my head, I sometimes go out to Toronto and do a little speaking tour where it's typically 7 or 8 Catholic schools in 3 days and a couple of other pro-life events and maybe a conference or a banquet or something like that. It's a really, really crazy 3 days. Kind of get in the car, drive to this event, run in there, do your talk, get to the next place. And it's an overwhelming thing. So the last time I was in Toronto, one of the things that they had asked, because that's kind of my thing. It's I'll do whatever you want me to do.
Right.
Keep me busy. It's fine. You're not paying per speech. I don't do that. So they were like, well, could you go out and give some encouragement to the 40 Days for Life, people who are in the area. And I was like, sure, I'd be happy. So this is near where Niagara Falls is. So it's just over the border. And so it's this morning, it's freezing, snow everywhere. But I go out to hang out with the 40 Days for Life people for an hour, and we're going to pray together and just try to encourage them and whatever. So there's this, lovely group of people, they're all, they've got their jackets and everything. Yeah, you're from Michigan.
In the north,
you know what it's like. It's not like it is in Charlotte.
Yeah.
More than, a couple of days out of the year. And so we're hanging, and in this case, it was already a little bit tricky because we weren't in front of an abortion clinic per se. We were in front of a hospital that happens to do abortions, right? And so, that already makes it harder because it's what are you protesting?
Yeah,
what are you doing?
clear.
You're further removed. You don't know who's going in for an abortion. So that's already harder. But then they started talking about how in Canada, they basically, so my understanding from what they told me, I might get a little bit of this wrong, but what I gathered was Canada has basically made it generally legal to pass buffer zone, for there to be a buffer zone around any place that does an abortion. But there's one little hurdle for the abortion clinic or the hospital or whatever is they need to specifically apply. Everyone has to apply individually for their buffer zone, which is weird to me, but that's how they have it set up. But it's not this unconstitutional thing as far as I can tell in Canada. They've already kind of agreed we can't have buffer zones. You just got to apply for it. Maybe each clinic has to kind of defend why do they need one or something like that. So they said in that case, their hospital hadn't applied for it yet. So it's just the only reason we could be on the sidewalk outside the parking lot. But they said, and when they do, inevitably, or it's they're going to, they're probably in the process, the paperwork's just not done yet.
Right.
Once they do it, we're going to be way over there. And they gesture over here, and it's hundreds of yards away on the other side of an intersection.
Oh my gosh.
And they're and we'll still do it. We'll probably be over there with our signs. And I'm just my heart sank because I'm I don't even know if I'd recommend it. Maybe it does some, maybe you might catch a few people who were going to go to the hospital for that, but
you're
so
so stifled from what you're able to do.
No way they're going to be actually reaching out to the people. So, and this is it's not the best case because it's a hospital. They're already not being able to specifically probably call out to people. But imagine if that's an abortion clinic, which they have those also. You can go from being right in front and being able to, hey, I'm sorry you're having a really hard day. I have I have resources for you, that kind of a thing, to being really, really far away and not being able to say anything and just hope and pray they happen to walk by you or something. It is huge. And we don't want to see this happening. And we've heard from insiders that like this is one of the strategies of the pro-choice side in America. This is something they want to see happen, and I wouldn't blame them. If I were them, I would be doing the same thing. It's be like this could be one of the best things against, because remember, for the pro-choice side, they are frustrated with all the pro-life successes of the last several years.
If you don't think they're building their case to get buffer zones around every abortion facility in the U.S., then you're not paying attention.
Yeah.
They're not stupid.
Yep.
They're business people, they're business savvy, and they're looking at what's hurting our business. That's the reality of the situation. And they have it, and they have it laid out. If they do this, then we're going to fight for this legislation. They already have their strategy in place. They're just waiting for us to make mistakes like the one that's made here.
And it might take a series of mistakes. You know, if I were them, what I would be doing is I wouldn't be jumping on every single time that pro-lifers act kind of crazy in front of an abortion clinic. I would be building up a long list of examples that then I could take and say, look, this is a general problem. It's not just a problem in front of this clinic.
Yes.
This is a systematic pattern of how pro-life people act in front of abortion clinics. And so we need to protect women by passing these little buffer zones. You can do your free speech stuff over there. That's fine. But just don't do it right in front of the clinic where you can save way more lives.
Right. And it would be obvious to build a case where this is a case where your right is infringing on someone else's right. Essentially, your constitutional rights are not never ending. They stop where someone.
Absolute.
It's not absolute.
Right.
And
so there's a competition between these two rights.
Yeah.
Right now, unfortunately, in America, abortion is a right. It is a legal right.
Seen that way.
And so they're doing a scales of justice kind of balancing and trying to say, how do we think we ought to balance this?
Right. So they're going to try to build it that way, and that it's harassment. It's violating the right to privacy and like all these things. And we've heard these arguments, and we know.
Yep.
Obviously, we're not saying we agree with everything, but that is the case that I would be building if I was on the other side.
Yep.
So, saying it's not constitutional or saying, well, we'll go through litigation, we'll appeal this. Even if this buffer zone in particular is not upheld in the same way that it was in Colorado, it's still a loss.
Yeah.
We're creating precedent. We're building this story, and that's not good for us.
Yep.
And again, like I talked about the resources. We don't want to be spending resources on this sort of thing. Yeah. There are other places we should be doing that. This is a huge loss for us. Yep. So talk to us about the specifics of the ordinance. Yeah. Let's go through what exactly is.
Let's talk about Mississippi.
Mississippi, specifically what's going on there.
And so you've been doing a lot of research on this. And so, when we kind of started looking at this yesterday, it was like, all right, this might be a thing worth talking about. And it was like a maybe. And then you went and did like 7 hours of research and it became, oh my goodness, there's so much more than I knew. And you just started filling me in a little bit this morning. And oh my goodness, there's a lot going on. So I want us to talk about, what is the situation? Start talking to us about what you've learned.
So I'm just going to go through exactly what was passed. There was a 15-foot buffer zone in front of the building. Mm-hmm. I'm going to talk about the layout. So the layout of this building, there's a pretty standard road. I wouldn't say it looks like a highway. Okay. I don't really know the city that well, but the road is semi-busy. It's not like a residential-looking neighborhood. I know there's
at least 2 lanes on each side kind of a thing?
Well, I know there's 1 lane on each side as far as I could tell. Okay. There's a hotel being built across the street. Okay. And so there's construction there, but people have been standing there in the last month or so. From all the videos I've been watching of pro-lifers out there, they are standing where the construction is. So my point is they are pulling right from the street into a very, very short driveway into the parking lot of the clinic. Okay. So some clinics, you will have them park in a parking lot and they're walking across the street or they're walking up there. And there's different ways you can navigate that with right-of-way. The right-of-way is pretty limited at this particular facility. So you really have a small stretch of sidewalk that is right on the other side of a fence, which is the fence that is on their building and on their parking lot. Okay. So essentially, to be, in my opinion, an effective sidewalk counselor, meaning you're trying to have the conversation. We talk about in our sidewalk counseling masterclass the different roles pro-life people can play. There are peaceful witnesses, and there are prayerful witnesses, and there are sidewalk counselors. If you're trying to have a conversation, you really need to be in that, what we would maybe refer to loosely as prime real estate. Okay, right. You're in the prime real estate of that clinic. Yeah. That is probably about 15, 20 feet on that sidewalk right next to the fence. And this is me looking at a bunch of news videos, a bunch of videos that the clinic escorts have recorded, some of the pro-lifers have recorded. So this is just my guess based on those videos, about 20 feet. So then they have the fence, which they have put up some sort of black tarp, so you can't see through the fence anymore. It really is opaque. So you need to be staying there. And with this 15-foot from the building, it's unclear if that entire real estate's going to be taken up. But what's worse is you have an 8-foot personal bubble for the clinic patients. Yep. So you cannot knowingly approach someone that you believe is coming to that facility and offer them a pamphlet or try to start a conversation or anything of that sort.
Yeah.
Furthermore, the restriction on any amplified sound within 100 feet of any healthcare facility. All these things apply to any healthcare facility in this city, but it really is because of the abortion facility. Right. Everyone knows that.
Everyone knows that.
Yeah, and the city attorney, Tim Howard, added an amendment that added shouting to the ordinance, which he defined as loud or boisterous shouting in any residential or quiet zone.
Yep.
So you cannot be calling out within 100 feet, 8 feet from the person. You can see how this is really devastating. This is really limiting.
You can't walk up to a car and offer a brochure, offer resources, or anything like. Yeah. You're just not going to be able to do any sidewalk counseling at that point.
Yes. Now, what is really, really important to understand, and what you aren't going to find out from the news, I actually had to contact one of the pro-life people we know who we can say lives and works in Jackson, knows the situation very, very closely, but we are not naming the source. And we're going to tell you some things that we have been given permission to share, and some things we are going to be speculating about based on what they shared.
Right.
So,
and there's some things that we're not going to share.
Yeah, some things we can't share.
We know more than we're going to say.
Yeah.
But for like certain obvious reasons, there are some things that I think like wisdom would say, let's not get into all of those details.
But we're going to try to share as much as we can for you to be able to learn from the situation.
Right.
So if you look in the news, if you watch these videos, you will see a group of people who are, I would describe them as abrasive, aggressive, not the kind of person I would want to talk to. Stereotypical, unhelpful street preachers are a big majority of them. Some of them are...
And again, well-meaning people.
Well, yes. So I would say some of them are well-meaning, benefit of the doubt. They probably have good intentions. I would say that their approach is... some of them are very bad.
Yeah.
I mean, shouting hell, 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 making the sounds of what it would feel like to burn in hell, like into their microphone. Yes. Some of them are like really, really intense and weird, right? And so remember, we have this black, opaque barrier. And all the person who's in the parking lot can see, I mean, they've driven past the signs and they've driven past the circus that's happening. You have clinic escorts, you have a bunch of pro-lifers, and they all have their signs and they all have whatever else, T-shirts with like religious sayings on them and things like that. So they've driven past that shortly. And now they're in the parking lot walking into the clinic. And they don't see anybody. All they hear is, well, one, blaring music from the clinic escorts. I mean, even when you read the news reports, they're talking about, I ain't no hollaback girl, twist and shout. Like, I'm hearing like rock and roll music playing very, very, very loudly from these speakers.
Right. Because they're trying to drown out the street preachers and the potential sidewalk counselors.
They have bullhorns, they have microphones, all of those things. And one of their microphone speakers is on a stand. So it's high enough to go over the fence so you can see the speaker and hear it coming on top of the fence.
Right.
And then you see like top of one of their really big, like you're going to hell signs. So as you can imagine, this is not exactly the warm, welcoming, women-focused environment that we would try to be teaching with our methods.
Right.
But that's not the purpose of the story. The purpose is there are loving, warm, welcoming pro-life people who are not there on the prime real estate sidewalk. They're farther away on like a little grassy area hill, which you will not see in the videos. And you will not... I only know they exist because I talked to someone who I believe to be trustworthy.
No one's taking videos of them, basically.
Exactly. News reporters are not going up to them and being like, what do you think about the situation?
Right.
So my understanding of Pro-Life Mississippi is that their policy is, and that this is the pro-life group in the area that the only one I could find. They're supposed to be the unifying force of this area is what it seems like. Okay. Their policy is we don't turn anyone away. They don't have a code of conduct. They don't have a, if you do this, you're not with us. That is not their policy. Their policy is the opposite of that. If you're out there, well, we're happy to have you, and at least you're out here.
Right.
And I want to advise pro-life organizations and pro-life people who are trying to have some sort of grassroots mobilization to not take this policy.
Yeah.
We need to have the compassion and the gracious attitude towards these people, but we also have a responsibility to stop them if they're going to cause problems.
Or try to encourage them to do a different thing, right? So, like, obviously we can't kick them off the public right away.
Right.
But we can at least try to encourage them to do to have a better way. And we can also make clear to the people around us that there's a difference. So, like, this is the thing that happened in Fresno. So I ran Fresno 40 Days for Life the first time we did 40 Days for Life. And then I had we hired another guy who's better at logistics and getting people involved to run it for the rest of the time. So I only did it the first year. But in that in one of the years, we had this issue where, like, so we always had a code of conduct. 40 Days for Life was always great about that. And you know, like, if you've ever worked with 40 Days for Life, there is so, like, they just kind of give you, like, oh, here's all the things. They make it as easy as possible for you. They've taken, like, the best of all the codes of conduct and put them together. Here's a template. Here's what you got to use. That one actually might not have been a template. It might have just been here's the thing. But then, like, there's other things where here's like a flyer template or whatever. It was great.
Yeah.
And so you know, like, anytime I went to volunteer or work or whatever, I would be the, you know, I forget what we called it, but it's the person in charge. You know, it's like the lead person. You know, we always had a lead there, and they always had a vest on, so that if the police came by, they always knew who straight to go to, and they were in charge, you know, of that hour at least. And so when volunteers would come in, we would always get them signed in. We'd always make sure they've signed a code of conduct that we have on file, and the code of conduct said a lot of normal things. We're not going to be violent. We're not going to trespass. We're not going to, you know, all those different
basic
things.
Stuff.
Just basic code of conduct. Then we had this other group start showing up. And luckily, they would typically be on the other side of the street. We didn't even have to try to, like, get them to separate. I think they just kind of decided on their own, like, naturally, let's keep ourselves separated. But we had people asking, like, are you with those guys who are, like, yelling and screaming and had weird, like, baby dolls and stuff like that? It was like it was kind of strange what they were doing. And we could just say, they're not with us. They haven't signed a code of conduct. They don't want to be with us. Completely separate group. Nothing I can do about them. You know, like that kind of a thing. Like, we had that in place because we had a code of conduct. And if any of our people ever violated anything, then we could remind them, hey, you've signed this thing. You need to follow these rules or you're not with us.
And so the thing is, we should have that code of conduct so that we can say they're not with us. If there are legal problems, if they start doing things that are really out there, we want to be able to say that. So that legally protects you. Yeah. But there's something bigger going on where most people aren't going to ask, are they with you? They're just going to assume. Everyone out there is together. Now, in this situation, that was true because they didn't have any sort of code of conduct and they didn't want to enforce or draw any boundaries. And even if you have drawn those boundaries, let's say I invite them, do you want to be part of Pro-Life Mississippi? And they say, no, because your code of conduct says that I can't do this and I want to be able to do this. I don't want to be in your group. You need to still have some sort of diplomacy with this group of, hey, would you like to get a cup of coffee with me? I'd like to talk about strategy on the sidewalk of what we want to see happen in Jackson. Talk through that, work through that. And we go through step by step how to have diplomacy with alternative Sabbath counselors in our course. It's lesson 14 in the Sabbath Counseling Masterclass. But we need to be doing that. And here in this situation, they could have done this, and I'm going to talk through exactly what happened. So in 2016, there was what is called a consent decree with the city between Pro-Life Mississippi and the city.
What is a consent decree? I've never heard that phrase.
I had never heard of that phrase, too, until I talked with this inside pro-life person we know. I didn't know what a consent decree was. I don't know law stuff. So here's my best read of what it is based on what I tried to do. And if I'm getting any of this wrong, I do want you to comment and tell me what I'm getting wrong about the situation because it seems like an easy solution to me. And if I'm totally off about something with the legality, we need to know that because I don't want to mislead people and we will retract. Okay, so a consent decree is essentially an agreement or like a settlement between, it's like resolving a dispute between two parties. Okay. So if this is without an admission of guilt, if it's a criminal case, or without liability if it's in a civil case.
Okay.
They're pretty much just coming to an agreement about what's going on.
Okay.
And so there was one between Prolife, Mississippi and Horton, which I think is the police chief of police in 2016. I linked the file below. So if you haven't look in the description, and read this, read this for yourself. In this document, it talks through different things that they're agreeing to. A lot of them have to do with free speech, and I don't have a problem with most of the document.
What's it basically say? You know, it was a summary before you go into whatever detail.
Apparently, there's a bunch of cases listed in this document, and they were going to dismiss all charges on these cases. There was like $2,500 that Prolife, Mississippi was going to receive. Like there were all these different things happening in this document that had to do with what seemed like arrests or taking like signs and property from the Prolifers. There were different things happening where they were pretty much agreeing, we're going to give you back your property, we're going to drop all these charges, and we're going to put that on file. There was also like the police have to go through an annual training every year on free speech.
So it sounds like maybe the police had
something was going
acted a little bit too.
Yeah, they didn't really quite understand how free speech works on the sidewalk. It seems like there was some issue there.
Yeah, okay.
I'm fine with all of that stuff. If you are getting arrested for legal free speech activity, they're taking your sign. They have no reason of doing that.
Sue them.
There was sue them. Have some sort of something like this or whatever. Talk to Alliance Defending Freedom. They're great,
right?
They are. So you got to get some lawyers, get some help. But there's a problem in here that I think, in hindsight, was a mistake. And if I was in Prolife, Mississippi, and I was having heard of this ordinance, this is what I would try to renegotiate. It says the city shall not enforce or threaten to enforce its noise ordinance, which is and it lists what it is, the code for it.
What?
So there's a noise ordinance already in place, unless it or until it does so by means of properly calibrating decibel meters employed by officers trained in the use of such machine. So essentially what this legal stuff is saying, my understanding of it, they cannot arrest you for violating the existing noise ordinance unless they test how loud you're being with one of those like decibel machines.
Well, so first of all, okay, I'm confused. I thought if there's a noise ordinance and there's going to be an arrest, they would have to get a decibel reading first, like, right? Like,
I'm not really sure if you have to or not. Like,
weird.
I don't know if a police officer can just come to your house and give you a ticket and say, hey, your college party is popping, but it's too loud. You're disrupting the neighborhood, and here's your ticket.
But also sounds weird it's almost like it's like an anti-buffer zone. It's like we have a noise ordinance, but we're not going to enforce it in this area. Seems like it almost seems like they're like it's part of a negotiation. It's like look, we'll give you some stuff and we'll settle this.
So to be fair, I don't know what led up to this thing being added. Okay. It could have been people were calling out in a very reasonable, not breaking the noise ordinance way of saying something like, hey, come over here and talk to me, like, da-da-da. You could be doing that, and the officer's like, hey, you're disrupting the peace. Here's your ticket, or you're being arrested for violating, I don't know.
Right.
But essentially it says, unless you're measured and they can show that you had violated this noise ordinance, you're not being arrested.
Yeah.
Now, the big problem in this city right now, the business owners, the mayor, the city council members, all of these people seem to be, if you are looking at the things they're saying around the time that this is being talked about, like in the city council meeting and things like that, they're mad about the noise. And I don't blame them. If you watch these videos, first off, the clinic escorts.
You pulled the Rachel voice for a second there.
I did the character that lives in my heart. I really don't blame them because they're playing I Ain't Got No Holla Back Girl or whatever song all the way up on this big speaker, the clinic escorts are, to drown out the prolifers who are yelling, you're going to hell, or like whatever. And I could understand the business owner, the hotel across the street is probably not very happy about this.
Yeah.
So
because you've got two sides being like as loud as they can, basically, because they're in like this competition. It's like this arms race of who can be the one affecting the client by what he's hearing.
And here's the great part of it: this noise ordinance protects the pro-life speech.
Really,
it stops the clinic escorts from drowning you out.
Yeah,
they can't play blaring music. One of them had a tambourine, and they're like playing music. You know what I'm saying?
The clinic escort has the tambourine. Yeah.
And so it's like. This is just such a circus. That's why I'm calling it a circus, because it looks like a 3-ring show.
Right.
And I'm just saying, if we had the noise ordinance on both sides, regulated and used and whatever as it should be, then it would solve a lot of problems here. And it would probably, I'm speculating, but it would make the sidewalk counseling more effective.
That's what I was thinking. It's like if I wanted to sidewalk counsel there, what I would want is I would want the clinic escorts to not be blaring loud music. I would want the street preachers and anyone else not on like megaphones, and I would want to just have the chance to call out just loud enough that she can hear over the fence, but in like a soft tone of voice. Hey, we have resources for you. If you just be willing to come and talk to us, give me 60 seconds. Let me tell you, something like that, because that's going to feel like the most approachable thing I can do. Like it sounds like they're close. They're just on the other side of the fence. So you don't, in theory, have to yell really loud.
You wouldn't need
to get her to hear what you're saying. Now, I get the clinic escort is probably also going to be talking to her as they're walking up. Hey, ignore those crazies, blah, 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 blah. I get that. But still, as like I keep on like explaining to public counselors who are like asking me questions, like, look, in the end, when you're trying to figure out all the different things you can do, there are a million things that you can do and say in front of an abortion clinic. What you should be asking yourself is, will action X make me more or less approachable?
Yeah.
Are you going to make it more likely that she comes to you, or are you going to make it more likely that she runs or walks faster into the clinic? Because it's probably one of those two things. And that really, really matters. We want to save as many lives as possible. We want to sidewalk counsel as effectively as possible, which is why we made a course to try to help the pro-life community to do that. And so that, I'd be like, this is weird to say because I'm in Charlotte and there's been a whole controversial noise ordinance thing happen down at the big abortion clinic where there's a bit of a circus that happens down there too. Like, I think the noise ordinance might have been a good thing for the pro-lifers. I'm with you.
So here's the thing. They had already had this agreement with the city. We're not going to enforce this noise ordinance like we normally would or without measuring or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm fine with them measuring it. I think that that's a really great way for making sure the police are playing fair when it comes to each side. We don't want a pro-choice police officer saying, oh, we're going to like arrest this pro-lifer. And while the clinic escorts are being
Should
just as loud.
Obviously be fair.
Obviously be fair. So if I was in Pro-Life Mississippi, if I was in that organization, I would have recommended, let's take the approach of, let's negotiate this noise ordinance, find a solution here. And that would mean you have to put down your megaphone. You probably have to put down your microphones where you're shouting or whatever else and find different methods, which, of course, we support.
Right. Arguably more effective methods.
But what I'm hearing is from the discussions that were going on behind the scenes in the pro-life organization, which I want to be super, super gracious, and it's important to point out, I have heard that they were unaware of this buffer zone ordinance being voted on until like a week before it happened.
Wow. It wasn't like they weren't paying attention or something.
It wasn't like they weren't paying attention. It sounds like they're doing the sort of things we would recommend for people. Be on the different email lists. Be paying attention to like what's going on in the city, especially something related to sidewalk counseling.
Right.
Like they were paying attention to all of these things, but it was kind of, we don't have specific evidence for this, but it seems like it was kind of being kept under wraps. And the pro-life people actually found out about the ordinance kind of by happenstance. A local reporter came up and started interviewing people on the sidewalk saying, how do you feel about the ordinance that's being voted on the 26th?
Like, what ordinance?
And they're like, what do you mean?
Or what vote? I didn't know there was a vote on the 16th.
Right. So I think September 17th, if I'm correct, September 17th was the day that like they were announcing they found out about the thing.
Okay.
The 26th it was voted on and it was passed on the 1st. It was not heard each side, which normally they don't allow, but they heard like 5 people from the pro-choice side, 5 people from the pro-life side, and then they voted on it on the 1st. Okay. So it was a really quick turnover. Yeah. Politics takes forever. Decisions like this usually take forever. Right. But that seems a little suspicious to me, just looking at the timeline.
Yeah.
But I don't know all the details about the situation. Point being, they didn't have a lot of time to try to think through strategy and all of this stuff. But it seems like a really obvious call if you're in this kind of situation and you have to choose between, we might upset some of the pro-life people on the sidewalk who are being really, really loud. We know that they might continue doing their stuff even if it becomes illegal to do so. Even if like the noise ordinance is now going to be enforced, they might choose to be arrested. We're going to have to draw lines in the sand. I'm telling you, that feels awkward. It's hard to do, but if it's the choice between that and we're going to have a buffer zone law and we all have to pack up and go home, or we have to move 500 feet away or 100 feet away or whatever.
and just pray and hope that she comes out on her own and not be able to reach out and let her know that there are resources and everything. Yeah, I mean,
and so
it's hard.
I want to bring up a couple more consequences that are happening that aren't just the buffer zone law from the pro-life group allowing this kind of activity to just continue without really, I don't want to say putting up a fight, but without diplomacy efforts, without disassociation efforts. They're not, as far as we're hearing, they haven't been really trying to stop this from happening. Their policy is we let everyone in. That's a bad policy. So I want to talk about some of the other consequences.
Okay.
One, I want to think about recruitment for a second. A lot of pro-life groups struggle with recruitment.
Yep.
Jackson, Mississippi has several colleges, and you don't see a lot of college students on these videos. You don't see a lot of young people coming out there on their own volition that want to sidewalk counsel, and I hear this all the time from pro-life leaders that are local people who have great hearts, but they're older generations, and they're like, I really want to pass the torch. I want to retire, but I can't get anyone to show up to my meeting.
Yeah.
I can't get anyone to come do the activity with me. And there's a lot of reasons contributing to that. One of them being pro-life advocates who are younger in my generation do not want to be associated with the screamers.
Yeah.
They don't want to be associated with a child holding a microphone and saying into the microphone, Mommy, please don't kill me.
And that's
Please
a real
come out."
story.
This is real.
That's a
I have
thing that
seen this
happens.
happening. I've heard about it happening from
And
an
they're
inside
in
source.
Mississippi.
And they're in Jackson, Mississippi. They give the child a microphone. Sometimes the child is saying, please don't kill your baby wants to live, things like that. I'm paraphrasing. You can go watch the video. I link to it in the description. Or they're saying sometimes, and I've seen adults say this too, on like the news reporter videos that are linked, and you can find them on YouTube as well. They're saying the adult, she seems maybe 19 years old, and she's like, Mommy, please, I want to live. They're doing those sort of things on the microphone. I'm sorry, most pro-life advocates don't want to go do sidewalk counseling next to you. Right. Because they think it's off-putting and they think it's weird, and are they wrong?
Right.
So
next to the street preacher types. Like, so it's interesting that we're recording this right now because just the other day I spent part of my day putting together a slideshow for this talk that Jacob and I are giving at the Sidewalk Advocates Conference, which is, I don't remember the full title, but it's functionally a Don't Be Weird on the Sidewalk talk. It's going to be great. Like, I'm so looking forward to this. It's going to be really funny. Yeah. And I hope we get more opportunities to do this talk together. But we're going to be talking through like how important it is to be approachable on the sidewalk and talking about the general psychology of the woman having the abortion and her boyfriend, and then a bunch of examples of, and I've got a lot of pictures, you can find a lot on Google image search of pro-lifers being a little weird and off-putting. And like, what you were describing made me think of this one thing I've got on there. I've got like a list of like signs not to have. And one of my talking points is anything on this truck. And I've got a picture of this big old truck. It's been custom made by some street preacher. It's got all these huge signs on it. And like one of the big things on the front is like in all caps, repent or perish. And I'm just like, this is not approachable, guys. Like, it's just not. Pro-life millennials don't want to go and do activism next to that, as well-meaning as that person might be who made the truck and spent all the money on the truck.
Please don't misunderstand. I believe evangelism is very important.
Yes.
Josh and I were in the office the other day. We had someone come in, and they were telling us about a story of a personal friend who is not a Christian, asking them questions about their faith. Yeah. And one of the questions that person asked was, do you think I'm going to hell as a non-Christian? And they had a great conversation about that while they were like driving together in a car or something. Yeah. Those conversations need to happen. Yes. 100%. Yes. But we got to be strategic about this, and we need to be approachable, especially when we're sidewalk counseling. What's our goal out on the sidewalk? Right. And I think these street preachers are not approachable at all, and it's hurting the pro-life efforts. Yeah. The other thing, so I talked about recruitment. I want to move on to another thing that I think is definitely happening. The Pregnancy Resource Center in Jackson is 100 yards away from the abortion clinic. And 100 yards away.
You can walk the person there. That's amazing.
Yeah, like, I don't know if it's like literally like across the street or what it is. I've heard it's 100 yards away. Wow. So like, yes, you are literally walking the person to the PRC, which is great. Yeah. I think when we have mobile units, when we have accessible pregnancy care centers and things like that right there, that is so helpful. But consider this. If you're being so loud on the sidewalk and you're saying those sorts of things, if the woman decides to leave the abortion facility and go get her sonogram at the pregnancy medical center, she's going to be hearing you during her counseling appointment, during her ultrasound appointment, and during the waiting room time. She's going to be hearing the things you're saying. Now, to be clear, I've heard that there are sometimes on the microphone people saying things that are not what I would consider to be bad messages. Sometimes it is something like, there's hope for you and your child. I have resources for you. I'm not always against amplified sound.
Yeah.
Especially if you're a soft-spoken... I'm not a soft-spoken person, okay? But if...
I couldn't tell.
Yeah. I can shout and call out, and even being just how short I am and my personality and how whatever, I think I could get away with calling out pretty loudly.
Yeah.
Friendly messages.
Yeah. Hey,
come talk to me. I have a free coupon for free ultrasound for you. I could say things.
It's more about the tone than the volume.
Exactly. It's more about the tone, the word choice you're using, all that messaging. There's more to it than just volume. I can imagine people who are more soft-spoken, especially people who are like the sweet old lady. We talk about that kind of sidewalk all the time, and I want them out there. They're great. I would be like, give the nice old lady a bullhorn. She can't speak up. She's coming off a cold.
Right.
Like, she needs to be heard. And... or whatever, okay? I want her to stand in the shade so she's not fainting. Maybe she needs to be a couple yards back more. I don't know. But I would be like, go get that lady a bullhorn. It's fine.
Right.
But when you have the bullhorn in your hand, you need to know the average person is going to look way more like a protester, and they're going to look more aggressive.
Right.
It raises your aggression level up if you have a bullhorn and you're speaking into that.
The perceived aggression level.
Perceived, exactly. Right. It's perceived. It's a higher risk.
Yeah.
But if there's an old lady and she's like,
right.
hello, I can't do
now
an
it just
impression.
looks funny because it's just like these two things don't seem to go together, and that's the point, right?
That's the point. So I'm just saying that there are situations. I'm not saying all people who are using microphones are ineffective. Not at all.
Right.
It might be the best effective strategy in that situation.
Right.
But in this situation, let me tell you, this is way beyond. And one of the clinic escorts has a video where, and I'm trying to remember what the app was called, but it was like they're filming, and on the app, they have a decibel reader. Now, I don't know how accurate it is on an iPhone, right?
It's a cell phone thing, right?
Right. It's probably not very accurate, but it's like showing it on there, and they're up next to the speaker, and they're trying to show like just how loud these people are being and stuff. Yeah. And it is way beyond what is reasonable from my perspective. So I want to talk about, that is affecting supposedly, I would assume the pregnancy care center's ability to help people and have
because they're trying to create like the safe space.
Yeah.
Like once the girl's in there, it's like, hey, we want her to stay. We want her to talk to the trained counselors. We want her to get an ultrasound if they have an ultrasound machine. Like we want her there and calm and not in a rush and all of that.
Be able to make this decision in a way where she's able to think through what she's feeling. Right. Talk through her options, get more information. And if she's being disrupted by a very loud person screaming about hell outside and about LGBT issues outside, how is that helpful for her? You know? So we want to serve her the best we can.
It might be something that the Prolifers or the street evangelists or whatever just like literally haven't even thought about that. I mean, some of the street evangelists might not even know where the PRC is. They might not even know like what's going on. But like even if they do, like this is not the most obvious thing for pro-lifers to be thinking about. You might be thinking, hey, once he's in the PRC, he's good. But if it's only 100 yards away, like this is why like when we as a team have, and we're not going to go into a lot of detail on this, but when we think about like, how we set up our outreaches on college campuses, I'm not just thinking about what's going to affect our team and what is going to affect the people who stop. I'm thinking about the people who walk by and don't stop and how and the kind of effect, either positive or negative, that we've had on them. Yeah. I'm thinking about the effect that we're having on the other clubs on campus who are going to be there long after we leave, whether it's Christian evangelism clubs or apologetics clubs or pro-life clubs, students for life clubs, things like that. Like we're thinking about like all these different things, and that's all of that's affecting the calls that we make. And you still sometimes have to prioritize one over the other. It's fine, but at least we're like trying to work out and think through those things. And it would make sense for some pro-lifers to be like, I'm just thinking about her being able to hear me. I'm not even thinking about the fact that they can probably hear me in a PRC counseling room down the street.
And that's why we're talking about this, because we want to think about strategy before we do actions,
Yeah.
and be critically thinking about what we're doing. I want to read from one of the news reports,
Okay.
something that they report the mayor said, and I think this is really telling. They say, while a majority of the protesters are peaceful, there's a small percentage that has historically caused problems. There you go right there. This is not all of the pro-lifers out there.
Yeah.
This is a small amount of them that are causing these issues.
A vocal minority, a very amplified vocal minority.
And so he turns towards the pro-lifers in that council chamber and he says, everyone on your side of the line doesn't necessarily exhibit your beliefs or exhibit discipline. We have all witnessed a vital circumstance outside this clinic. And one of the council president ultimately sided with the business community, which the business community is upset about the noise, right? And she said the decision was difficult. The layers of complexity, quote, sorry, the layers of complexity on this makes it a very difficult decision for me. I've seen the protests, and what we must consider is what the business community is putting up with as a real need for some better and more peaceful moments in their communities. So, we have other people saying there are things more important than economic development. That's what the pro-lifers are saying.
Right.
But look at what's happening in the community. There are ways to work around where you're not upsetting the businesses around you more than you need to. You want to be able to have that prayerful, peaceful presence that's effective. But we don't necessarily need, especially at this location, that loud amplified noise.
Right.
I think that they should have been on the noise ordinance over having this buffer zone passed.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, if you can choose between those two things, you way want the noise ordinance over a buffer zone. You want to be able to be there. You want to be able to call out. You can do such effective public counseling without amplified sound. Like, that's far better than doing amplified sound from 100 feet away or 100 yards away or whatever it is. And I was thinking about the situation for the businessmen in the area, and like I don't want to like go too far on the side of like, well, we just need to like only worry about them, because it's like we believe abortion is total killing, and it's like, look, they've put their business near a place like that. There might be some effect of that, like, and they might lose some businesses. Like, anytime you're picking a real estate decision, you got to be thinking about like, what is all going on in this area, and will any of that affect me? But I also like, and David B. Wright, when he's on a course, he talks about like some ways to try to partner with the businesses in your area. Like, there are businesses near abortion clinics that will let pro-lifers park in their parking lot and use their bathroom and all these different things, because they want to help. They don't want the abortion clinic to be there. Yeah. And you're going there and you're forming this positive relationship with them, which sounds like it's the opposite of what has happened here, where you've got businessmen and business women, some of whom may be against abortion. Yeah,
they might not want the abortion clinic there any more than you do. Right. They would probably be happy to see it go, so they don't have anyone out on the sidewalk with signs.
I'm sure they would prefer that.
They would probably prefer that. But what the reality we're looking at is there are ways, if we think outside the box, and I love the stuff that David B. Wright says in that deeper dive video we have specifically on how to get the community to help you shut down the abortion facilities in your area. And he walks through how to cut off their funding, how to cut off support in the community in a way that is actually going to be sustainable and not going to have them turn against you. There are really bad ways to go about this, and there are better ways to go about this. And I think one of the hurtful things that we can do is have really loud, disruptive noise several days a week. And the other thing is, the abortions are not always on the same day. They're alternating on different days because they're actually flying abortion practitioners from out of state in to perform the abortions. And so I'm guessing it's probably moving around their schedule and the clients that are coming their schedule. And so they might have 1 week Monday, Wednesday, and the next week Tuesday, Thursday, or whatever. And the reason that's important is this is affecting the business owners, all throughout the week. I mean, like, it's just it really is a circus. So I want to challenge pro-life people to do the uncomfortable. And that is talk to other pro-life people, especially when they're weird. Yeah. it doesn't always have to mean we're going to get in some sort of, dramatic fight and have this like community like dispute and infighting and all of that. I'm not saying we want more of that.
Right.
What I am saying is we need to be working together to find strategies where we're going to be able to both do what we need to be doing on the sidewalk.
Yeah.
And I just feel like if we don't have any sort of boundaries, any at all, we're going to run into more and more of these issues.
Yeah. And you also want to encourage the sidewalk counselors to take a data-driven approach. So I'll make an analogy. So I went into this I spoke at CareNet's conference recently, and I came there mainly just to do this talk on pro-life apologetics and do some networking. And I wasn't expecting to learn a lot from the other workshops because it's mainly for PRC leaders, and I'm not. So there are some differences between like the things that we have to be thinking of. Like they've got a bunch of workshops for like ultrasound nurses. Like it just doesn't affect me.
Yeah.
But I was really happily surprised when I went to this like 4-hour workshop on email marketing and social media stuff to learn a lot and be like, wow, there's a whole lot that we could be doing better. But the way that these guys started, when they started talking about how you should set up your donation page, how you should do your social media, they specifically said, and you could hear like the air get sucked out of the room. Like everyone thought they were nuts. So these two young, awesome guys from who work on CareNet's team, they said you should base your social media strategies, your donation, like all that stuff, you should not base it on your intuition, and you should not base it even on what your donors say they want. You should base it only on data. So we test everything. We A/B test everything. We try to figure out what's actually working the most effectively, and that's what drives us. It's not what it's our own intuitions. Your intuitions are probably wrong. And I can say, I found that out because when they started talking about what you should do with general donation pages, I'm like, oh, we're making like all of the mistakes.
We're doing all the things you said not to do.
Exactly, because we did it based on my intuition like 5 years ago and I haven't touched it since, kind of a thing. And I'm like, oh man, my intuition's way off according to literally like 3,000 tests that have been done by this other nonprofit they partner with. And so similarly here, what if we could get people to understand that we should base our strategies of what we do in front of abortion clinics based on data? Like maybe a thing that you could negotiate with the street preacher types is, hey, what if we do a day where the thing happening here is the street preaching, and we're going to count how many people leave the abortion clinic, how many saves happen, and then let's do a day where you guys are off the microphone and the signs aren't here, and we're just sidewalk counseling the way that we think we ought to sidewalk counsel. Let's count that. And if we need to run this test like 5 times or 10 times or whatever before you really know.
You've got to get good data. You're going to have to do, I would do let's do a year-long study.
Yeah.
You're able to be out here this time, I'm going to be out here this time, and we're going to both do our best and see what methods are working.
Right.
And I also think that you should not just be testing it in one place. You need to test it in lots of different areas.
Right.
And luckily, there are good groups out there that are testing methods in different areas.
Yep.
And I want to be as understanding as possible of the situation. And the reality is sometimes people just don't know what's out there.
Yeah.
They don't know there are other methods.
Yeah, that's true.
But what we're hearing from this pro-lifer who's in the area is that the pro-life people who have gone through some training have not had an opportunity to be on that prime real estate area. Yeah. They haven't had an opportunity to even try out their methods at this facility.
Right. I think that's a really important point because when I think I feel like this is a theme that's come up a lot of times when we're thinking through different strategies and different groups who are trying different things. I think there are sometimes, I think this is a really charitable read. I think sometimes when groups do things that are pretty extreme, or comes across aggressive or abrasive, or whatever, I think sometimes what's going on for those people, it's not that they don't care about strategy or they don't care about what they're doing. They're just like, whatever, I'm just gonna do what my dad did or whatever. I think sometimes it's desperation. It's like this has been going on for over 45 years legally. It's crazy. Roe v. Wade is crazy. Casey versus Planned Parenthood is even worse the way it's argued. And we're still here, and it seems like it's never going to end.
Yeah.
And I'm getting older and I want to make an impact. And it seems like at this point, the best thing to do is something like I'm not going to hold back kind of a thing, And I get that.
I'm so glad you brought this up, actually, because lots of times I will hear them say things that I totally understand and empathize with along the lines of, if they were throwing toddlers off of a building over here, would you really stand back and do the strategy you're doing?
Right.
And my response to that is, yes, I would be taking the approach I'm taking if all of these other things were true that unfortunately are true.
Right.
If that killing was hidden and if it was rhetorically misrepresented again and again for decades, strategically manipulated into being something that it really is not.
Right.
If it's shaped as healthcare and it's shaped in this way and this and this and this and all of these other pieces were true, then yes, I would be taking the exact same strategy I'm taking. Why am I taking the strategy I am? It's not because I don't care. It's not because I don't think it's real killing. It's because I'm dealing with all of these factors and I'm playing the long game.
Yeah.
We're trying to take a strategy that is really going to have a lasting, sustainable effect in the U.S., is going to save, hopefully, as many lives as possible.
Right.
And if I can be convinced that another strategy is going to do that, I'm going to do it no matter how much courage, how awkward it is. I'll do it.
Right.
But I'm not doing it because I don't think it's cool to be or something.
Right.
Honest to goodness.
Or young people will be afraid of it or whatever. No, it's like we want to save as many lives as possible.
Yeah.
But that's not just how many lives can we save today.
Yeah.
It's how many lives can we save permanently, and in the long run, how can we get our culture to a place where we can, make abortion illegal and unthinkable. And especially that unthinkable side is probably going to take a while.
It is going to take a long while. Yeah.
If everything that our culture is seeing is circus type activity, it's going to take longer, and that's going to be literally that's going to make a difference in how many lives are getting saved every year.
And so if your strategy is one that results in a buffer zone law being passed in your city, and maybe eventually your state and the entire country, is that strategy the strategy you want to take?
Yeah.
Would you consider that to be a win? I would definitely consider it not to be a win if we get buffer zones because of a strategy.
Right.
I want to take strategies that are not going to have us that. Because I think I've seen sidewalk counseling be effective. I mean, look at the numbers that are saved. I follow Human Coalition on Twitter.
I love them. It's one of the best pro-life groups.
They're so great. I really, really like their tweets because it's the same thing every time, and you just see the number go up and up and up. Because they track. One of the things we love about the group so much is how careful they are with data, research, tracking numbers. Yep. They're organized in that way specifically. I think that's one of their specialties. And they will post this many children, da-da-da-da-da. They're tracking it, and it is encouraging to see that. Yeah. It really, really is.
If you're discouraged, go follow that Twitter account.
Yeah, it is encouraging for me to see.
Whatever.
Definitely. And of course, I like hearing the more in-depth stories, like when Jacob talks about a specific thing that he has had happen on the sidewalk. Yeah. I love hearing that too. Yeah. And it's different seeing just a number than seeing Jacob be hey, look at this text of a baby I got. I mean, of course, that's different. Yeah. Point being, we need to be thinking through strategies, and I'm not trying to pick a strategy that makes me feel good. Right. I'm not trying to pick a strategy that makes me likable and have friends and popular and whatever, okay? Yeah. And I just think that there are better ways for pro-lifers to argue about this than by saying, you're not taking my strategy because you're not courageous enough.
Our strategy should be wise as serpents, gentle as doves, right? Yeah. We want to be really wise and careful. So as we wrap up, we talked a little bit this morning, and we've decided to offer something.
I might regret this. I don't think
you might. I don't know. I kind of had to check you a little bit because this is going to affect you way more. It's not going to affect me at all. I think it's a cool idea. So
Rachel does something she regrets. I feel
that should be the title.
That should be the
podcast.
title. Oh
no. And so what we're going to do is one of the most common questions we get from sidewalk counselors, especially when they're new, is, oh my goodness, what do I do about this other group? Like, this is just, unfortunately, this is just a common challenge for sidewalk counselors. It's why we have a lesson in the sidewalk counseling masterclass about it. But this is one of the areas that we want to do more testing.
Yes.
And more work because, Jacob only has so much experience doing that in front of the abortion clinics that he has worked at. And he has had experience with pretty aggro people.
Unhelpful methods of sidewalk counseling.
Really unhelpful methods.
He has witnessed it, yeah.
So we've got some strategies that we already give people, but we would also like to be able to customize and test that for some other people. And so if you are having some struggles with that and you would like us to help you, then what Rachel is offering is to do a free 45-minute consultation with you to try to help give you specific advice for your situation. Now, there's a couple of things that you've got to do.
Yeah.
For this is you need to buy the Sidewalk Counseling Masterclass. It's $50. It's not a big deal. So sidewalkcounselingmasterclass.com. You can go and get that. Specifically, there's a lesson on there. It's lesson, I think, 14.
Yes.
You need to watch that first because I don't want Rachel to have to reteach this entire lesson that we've already recorded and made a video for it. Like, watch that to get that kind of that foundation because then your 45 minutes with Rachel can be spent on customizing that, talking through your very specific situations. And we might start testing some even other strategies, and you might be able to help us test those things. Like, a lot of people get excited about us doing R&D on campuses. You want to help us do R&D in front of abortion clinics? We want to help you help us to do R&D so we can help more people, help the entire pro-life community, because this is a common problem, and you might be able to help us that. So we're offering the consultation for free.
Yeah.
All you've got to do is you got to get the Sept counseling class. You need to use the coupon code HELP.
Yes.
HELP. It's only going to give you like 1% off. This isn't like a big discount thing. It's only 1% because I can't do 0. It's not supposed to be a big discount. It's supposed to just let us know that you're coming because of this podcast and you want help and you're basically accepting the offer.
Yeah. So this free consultation, what I want you to do, and when you buy the course, or if you already are a member of the Sidewalk Counseling Masterclass, this applies to you too. If you're already a member, email info@equalrightsinstitute.com and we'll handle you personally because we want to take care of our members who are already a part of the masterclass. But if you're not, purchase the masterclass, use that coupon code so our admin will see that. She will know you came from this podcast and that you are going to get a 45-minute free consultation with me. I'm actually going to spend more than 45 minutes on you because I'm going to have you fill out a form. We're going to give me some of the information: who, what, where, when, why. I know in these situations, sometimes it's like we've been dealing with 2 years of drama, and here's the backstory. I will read the backstory, okay?
Yeah.
I will go through it, and I'm going to try to come together with you and collaboratively come up with a strategy about what we can do, some of the steps you're going to take to find diplomacy and solutions with this situation. Yep. And I'm opening this up to sidewalk counselors. I'm actually going to open this up to other groups as well, but I want you to be a local leader. So if it's like a right to life group at the Respect Life Committee at your church, or you're like a local Right to Life affiliate or something like that. If you have that story and you have a question of like, is this applicable for the free consultation? If it's something similar to the sidewalk counseling stuff, I would like to be able to help with that.
So be a little bit specific here. Do they need to be dealing with an issue with a group in front of the abortion clinic, or are you talking about like anyone having a problem with a certain kind of pro-lifer?
So no, I'm talking about in front of the abortion clinic, but you don't have to necessarily be sidewalk counseling.
Okay.
So if you're like a prayer effort, but there's like people
40 days for life or
40
whatever.
40 days for life. Yes, exactly. So if you're doing something like this that's not necessarily having conversations, but you're doing pro-life activity in front of the abortion clinic, and you're having problems with pro-lifers who are doing some sort of activity, I'm going to be opening up to that too. So you don't have to be an experienced sidewalk counselor.
And we've got, we created the Sidewalk Counseling Masterclass to help those people too. We have an entire lesson on the non-talkers, on the people that are there to be present. You don't feel called to verbally reach out to people, but you feel called to pray and to be present, to be a witness. Like, we have things for you to do that actually help the sidewalk counselors who are doing verbal stuff too. So the Sidewalk Counseling Masterclass will help you too, even if you don't think of what you're doing as sidewalk counseling per se.
Yes. And if you're wondering, why is Rachel offering this sort of free consultation? one of my skill sets is problem solving. Okay.
Yep.
I'm going to try to solve the problem for you. If I can't figure out how to solve the problem, or at least get some strategies in mind and some attempts, if I'm reading your backstory and I'm like, I'm totally unqualified to give advice about this, I'm going to find a pro-life leader who is going to help me come up with that strategy for you.
Yeah.
So I'm going to connect you with where you need to go for help.
Yep.
So this is hopefully going to really make an impact on your local efforts so you can prevent buffer zones from happening in your area.
We just want to help. We
Yeah.
just want to help to avoid buffer zones and help you save as many lives as possible.
Yeah. So you want more information about the Sidewalk Counseling Masterclass, you want more information about any of the cases we talked about today or about this thing happening in Mississippi, there's lots of links below. I've organized everything that I think is like the top maybe 6 resources that you should look into if you want to know what happened.
Awesome.
Yeah.